The views and opinions expressed by the hosts do not state or reflect those of the company and its management. Any assumptions, views, and insinuations made by the hosts or guests do not reflect those of the show, the management, and the network. Listener discretion is advised.
Warning. This podcast contains spoilers.
Third World Cinema Club.
Let's talk about another film. This one is all the way from India. It's called The Disciple. It's directed by Chaitanya Tamhane. And it's about this man named Sharad Nerulkar. He devoted his life to a very specific sort of classical music in India. And he's trying to follow the disciplines and the tradition of many classical musicians, or at least classical masters in that specific genre of Indian music. And as he goes along with his life, he starts to wonder if he's able to achieve that level of perfection that the type of music that he's doing is, at least if he's able to execute it in his own music. So it's about him finding his own musical identity, but at the same time, it's also an observation on what's going on in the society in terms of how music has developed throughout the years. Yan. So, sige, Kuya Rolando, ikaw, what are your thoughts on The Disciple?
I think pinakagusto ko dun sa film is yung tone and mood niya, and the way it uses yung traditional instrument in the musical scoring. And I really like the way na meron tayong clash dito ng modernization and yung traditional way of looking at things. And the main character has so much layer. I mean, some people could perceive him as a radical, with a radical belief on his traditional belief about music. Because one of the conversation na nangyari is yung parang na-establish yung master and mentorship nung teacher niya. It's because of some belief na not necessarily true about their master. So parang nag-believe lang sila blindly with this person. And then it goes to the belief that you're trying to defend, or you're trying to make hold of that belief for so long, but you can't fight modernization. You can't fight time. I mean, some people will find ways on how they interpret one thing or another, and we move forward. I mean, moving forward doesn't mean that it's in the wrong direction, but it just means that we are undergoing change. And I like the way na pinakita ng film na we have our passion, but sometimes time's just up, and we can stay with that passion, but if time doesn't agree with it, maaring magutom tayo with that choice if we stay with it. And I think I like it in that sort of lens, that it makes us decide whether to move forward or to reinvent ourselves para maka-adapt tayo dun sa survivability natin if we decide on taking in new things with life.
Yan. Okay. Kuya Jim, your thoughts?
Actually, no, pinapanood ko to, natatawa ako kasi di ba kasama natin si Direk James Mayo. Yung film niya na The Chanters, it reminds me film na The Chanters, itong The Disciple. Although ang difference lang ng The Disciple and The Chanters, kasi sa The Chanters si Jelly May Galbaniga ay bata siya. Unlike kasi with The Disciple, yung lead character, nakita natin yung fascination niya from the traditional chanting sa North India, and then nag-transcends kasi from young to, let's say, mga 40s na ata siya, yung nakita nating tawag dito growing years niya, ganon. And ang maganda kasi dito with The Disciple, kasi di ba may part kasi sa atin na tayong tao, no, kapag meron tayong inadmire na let's say inadmire na celebrity, although in this film hindi naman celebrity yung inadmire niya, but guru, 'di ba, na kinonsider niyang mentor, 'di ba? Parang yung tawag dito, susundan natin yung yapak niya. Ganun yung nangyayari kasi parang nagsisilbi yung natin role model. However, 'di ba, sa later part ng film na nakita natin na ito palang mga kino-consider niya na mentor or guru ay medyo may kakaibang reputation. Hindi siya yung we thought na sikat, ganun, or something respected. Actually, yung mga mentor na kino-consider niya ay bumabalikwas or hindi sila yung the usual, 'di ba, na tawag dito na mentor or guru na kilala na respected, ganon. And another thing pa na nagustuhan ko with The Disciple ay yung tawag dito, kung paano nagkaroon ng impact, 'di ba, dun sa lead character, yung traditional chanting na parang for him mas maganda na i-preserve yon rather than yung hindi na makilala or hindi na tawag dito ma-discover pa yung traditional chanting. And ang nagustuhan ko pa dun sa lead character ay nandun sa kanya yung tawag dito, naglalaban yung part na naiinggit siya dun sa fame nung isang young singer, 'di ba, kasi makikita na sa TV na parang there is a part of him na ay sana ko yung nandun. Pero hindi niya na-achieve, gano'n. Na parang 'di ba may part doon na nung may video na siya yung nagpi-play nung traditional chanting, criticize siya, gano'n. Saan ba bang mga nagustuhan ko about the film? Ayun, yung parang ito pa yung medyo 'di ba striking siya yung okay with the word na nagma-masturbate siya, 'di ba? Habang nanonood ng porn. Ako kasi ang interpretation ko doon was that maybe I will share na lang a lesson that I learned from a support group that I joined. No, kasi ang masturbation kasi parang nagiging katatawanan na lang, 'di ba? Ganun. So ang masturbation kasi may mga reason kung bakit ginagawa. So we called it HALT-B. So H stands for hunger, A anger, L loneliness, T tiredness, and then B for boredom. So ang nakita ko doon na kung bakit niya ginagawa yung pagmamasturbate ng lead character ay there is a loneliness in him, meron ding anger kasi meron siyang part na sana nagawa ko to pero hindi ko nagawa. Ganon. And ano pa ba? Siguro last na lang na word ay nagandaan ako sa pelikula. Ganon. Nagandaan ako. Maganda yung pagkakagawa ng pelikula. Ayun.
Ayun. So, thank you, Kuya Jim. How about you, Doc? What are your thoughts on The Disciple?
Ako dito, I guess I'm the only, siguro dissenting opinion. I don't think the film is bad. I think it's a great film. Pero I was very frustrated watching it. I might need to rewatch it somewhere down the line. Yeah, I get the chanters' comparisons about modernity and classical music. May inggit nga siya regarding yung mga people who, kasi iba yung way that music operates in contemporary society. Also, the art itself is dying kasi there may be no more practitioners in the future. Additionally, may sinabi din si Jim about yung scene na nagmamasturbate siya. So parang, kasi if you're looking at this path to enlightenment as a spiritual process, the things that he does, yun, masturbation, yung inggit from others, it's not only boredom, it's parang makamundong bagay. There are worldly distractions from the purity of your music, kumbaga. And tsaka meron ding ako naramdamang sense of restlessness from him na hindi siya mapakali about something. Oo. And ultimately, at the end, na nakikita mong his performances are, kasi his parang musical form is called the rag. It's Indian improvisational parang technique or whatever. Pero nawawala over the course of the film, nawawala yung musicality niya, nawawala yung enthusiasm niya for singing, because ika nga nung kanta, I tried my best, I guess my best wasn't good enough, no? And I understand it kasi not everyone is a Mozart, or not everyone can be like Beethoven. There will be people who falter, and that's okay. And sabi nga ni Rolando before, it's up to you whether you try to reinvent yourself or try to apply yourself into the service of the art. Even if you're not like a performer, you can be a cultural worker, kumbaga. Parang ganun. It's a testimonial for cultural work. Kasi yung mga iba dyan, di naman gumagawa ng pelikula, but they try to preserve it. They try to spread awareness. They try to critique works. Di ba? They try to write about it. So there are a lot of different avenues. Yun lang talagang frustration ko from the film. Ay parang na-sense ko na yan from the start. Tapos parang the film takes a while to get there. Pero that's just a very subjective parang line to view it. Kasi so it's probably just me. Pero yun nga, so compared to Chaitanya's other film, Court, another Marathi film, very nice film, more about like systemic like corruption or whatever. I prefer his earlier film compared to this one. Pero I think it's just me. Yun lang.
Yeah. Ayun, no? I agree with Doc and Kuya Jim, and even Kuya Rolando with all of your points. For me, siguro, I think my opinion wouldn't be too different with everyone. Pero for me, kasi I consider the fact that in Indian culture or Indian society is based on, always finding enlightenment in everything that they do. With Hinduism, they call it moksha. With Buddhism, they call it nirvana. In a way, it's very similar then to the main concept of the chanters of escaping the restlessness. And it's one of the first few things that we hear, from Maay's tapes, diba? One of the masters of Kayal music, of that Indian classical music, no. And for me, it's more of a film about charade, trying to get away from that restlessness, and for him to do that, he needs to give up all of the earthly desires that he has. And earthly desires include jealousy, anger, lust, and basically the 7 deadly sins in a way. And he's having trouble letting go of that. And because of that, his music is affected in the process. There are many scenes that would show na he really is trying to live one Guru Jati, who happens to be the protege of another, a huge fan and, a huge influence to him in loving that sort of classical music. For me, it's more on him acknowledging that his mind will always be restless and that he's never gonna be perfect in his entire lifetime. And that's okay. He might not have that stillness in his mind, the same way that others do. But eventually, in the long run, he's found that sort of peace, maybe in a different approach or in a different venue, because maybe Kayal music isn't for him. He's a very emotional person all throughout the film. It shows. Kaya like enlightenment. So he decided to live with the fact na hindi niya ma-achieve yung same sort of level na meron si Mai, because he perceives Mai as this sort of god or goddess, no? Yun nga, sabi nga ni Kuya Rolando, his perception on music is very radical. Like, it has to be like this lang. This is the only absolute approach to music. That's why when, spoiler alert, one of his students approach him and tells him that the student wants to be a part of a fusion band that combines Kayal music with what do you call this, with modern contemporary musical influences. He says that he can do that, but he has to let go of what do you call this, the class that he's attending. Yon. And at the same time, remember in that one particular scene wherein to a critic who says a lot of bad things about his masters or his mentors, diba? Bigla niyang binuhusan ng tubig sa mukha. Yan. So, he really values the purity of the craft, and it's admirable that he can do that. But at the same time, so long as he lets these emotions get to him, he'll never find the same form of enlightenment that other people, that mentored him had. And so, dito, he decided in the end, diba, spoiler alert, that he will just preserve the music na lang that he admires and share their work for future generations. Despite not having or not finding that escape to restlessness, he still was able to find something that fulfills him, in himself. And in a way, that works. He will never find the quote-unquote truth na sinasabi nga in Mai's tapes, which is yung like, what do you call this, equivalent of, finding that moksha, that divine enlightenment, and that's okay. He still in a way won his battles, in the music industry, just in a different way. Yeah. So I personally loved it. Whether I loved it more than the chantable, because the chanters is on a whole nother level, but I really love what the disciple tried to discuss. And I think, Kevin, you've also watched the film, diba? What are your thoughts about the disciple?
Yeah, love hearing your thoughts. I love the screenplay, especially the cultural value yung nga nadagdag nitong movie na to. And, it feels resonant because we're mentioning chanters. And yeah, I get what you're all saying about the plight of the main character, about perfecting this art form that seems to be obsolete in this modern world. And, it's just it's just a textured character journey about a man trying to accomplish something that he's not sure whether he's going to attain that goal or not. And, with that comes the insecurities, the doubts, and I guess I find the movie fascinating, but not necessarily the music. Not necessarily the music will draw me into listening, because again, there's an hypnotizing quality into it that somehow lulls me into sleep. And and that music, I can never really get that music, that rag music, because it's some sort of freestyle. There's a freestyle approach in there, so that's interesting. But I can't. But but I want to talk about what John said about, because he find the pacing a little bit disappointing. And yeah, that I felt that too, because there were scenes there I can't get this out of my head, when there are meandering long tracking shots of him motorbiking, then there's voiceovers about the realizations of that character, what's going into that head, but in his head. But I guess I would have preferred to have the movie to have a shorter runtime to make it more compact. But yeah, I guess you've all guys touched on this now, but yeah, it's a conflict about trying to preserve something that you're not good at, and in the end, it has all the good intentions. So, yun, I guess.
That's it. That's the end of this episode. Thank you so much for listening. This would not be made possible without your support, and of course with the help of Cutprint Podcast Network's team, headed by Patricia Marie Ferrer, Network and Podcast Manager Ellie Kirong Cole, Social Media Manager Rowan Palomares, Business Development Team Lead Lee Lirio, and from the creative side, Christina Lido and Andre Luis Castillo Ibanez. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Stitcher, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, or wherever else you get your podcasts from.
Third World Cinema Club.